So I really need you guys to watch this gameplay because all the footage I'm using is from Grandmaster level content and I'm absolutely demolishing everything. And with this build, you can forget about consecration because now I can stun overloads with my thunderclap, have a radiant at all times, amazing melee regeneration, unbelievable damage resistance, and so much more. And if you want to learn how to do all of that, make sure you stick to the end of the video. And without further ado, let's get straight into it. Now the core part of this build is point contact brace. This got buffed recently to where the lightning strikes do way more damage, and the lightning strikes also contribute to your melee energy. I also recommend you have a trench barrel shotgun because you are punching everything. But with that out of the way, let's get to the prismatic subclass setup. And we're going to start off with Blade Fury being the super. Now there are two reasons why I'm using Blade Fury. One, because I can gain woven mail when I pick up an orb using a fragment that I will mention later. But the second reason being that all roaming supers got a buff where they come back really fast. And this one's a pretty good one. I would also like to mention that woven mail gives you a whopping 45% damage reduction, and we can get even more damage reduction, which I'll get into in just a second. For the class ability, I'm using thruster because I want to, and for the jump, it doesn't really matter. But for the melee, obviously we're going to be using thunderclap. Now if you didn't know, thunderclap actually gets a whopping 80% damage resist against combatants during its animation windup, and stacking this on top of woven mail is insane. Like, I'm legit just tanking these shots from Grandmaster champions and bosses without a thought in my head other than thunderclap. And then we're going to be taking the shackle grenade because it stuns unstoppables, keeps people still for you so that you can punch them at full power, and builds pretty good darkness energy. Then for the first aspect, of course, we're going to be using knockout. This makes your melee have more range and damage if you critically wound a target or break their shield, and also regenerates your health while also making you amplified when defeating enemies with your melee. Being amplified is also important because the exotic also makes it so that when you are amplified, your lightning strikes do more damage. So not only are we getting our health back with good survivability, we can also output a lot of hurt. For the next aspect, we're using Diamond Lance, as defeating targets with your abilities creates a Diamond Lance. Not only can these help with stunning unstoppables, but if you want even more damage resistance, you can slam these on the ground for 2 stacks of frost armor. But now for the first fragment, we're using Facet of Purpose, as this makes it so picking up an orb will grant us woven mail since we're using Blade Fury. If you're using something like Thunder Crash, I probably wouldn't use this then because amplified isn't really that important since we're already getting it from knockout. Then for the next fragment, we're going to be using Facet of Awakening, as rapidly defeating targets with light or darkness damage creates an elemental pickup matching the damage type. Now in my opinion, Ionic Traces are the best one, and with Thunderclap and the lightning strikes, we're creating a bunch of Ionic Traces. They will also track to you, so you don't even need to run and pick them up yourself. And picking up these Ionic Traces gives you ability energy, which can help us even more with Thunderclap, and since we're creating so many. Next, we're going to be using Facet of Protection because we're meleeing a lot, meaning that we're always going to be surrounded. This also gives us another 15% damage resistance on top of all the other damage resistance that I mentioned before. Then for the next one, we're using Facet of Balance, and mainly for the rapidly defeating targets with light damage grant melee energy. So now we can get our melee back faster from the exotic perk, the Ionic Traces, and Facet of Balance. And trust me, Facet of Balance will be proccing way more than you think because those lightning strikes are no joke. Now the last one's going to be Facet of Dawn so that we can get radiant every time we hit someone with our thunderclap. I love pairing this with Acreus because I can get trench barrel and radiant, and it will just absolutely nuke anything in your path if you didn't kill them with a thunderclap. Now you might have noticed that I haven't mentioned something like Facet of Courage, so that my thunderclap can do more damage to people that are suspended. Now in my opinion, I've used this build in plenty of GMs, and I believe that Facet of Courage is a bit of overkill, since you can low-key just keep thunderclapping over and over again, and if they're not dead, your trench barrel shotgun should do the job just fine. But now moving on to the weapons of choice, I believe any trench barrel shotgun will do just fine, as we're always meleeing something so we can get more damage on our gun. If you don't want to have fun with shotguns, something like a Lost Signal can do just fine. For the secondary, I've been using Vantage Point quite a lot because of jolting feedback, and because of jolting feedback, you can stun overload champions and unstoppables with the artifact mod. So it's like you have 2 anti-champion mods in one weapon, which is pretty cool. On top of that, you can also make Ionic Traces with an artifact mod that I'll mention a bit later. Now for the heavy weapon, I'm a big Acreus fan as it has trench barrel, and we have anti-barrier shotgun this season. I mean, it won't really matter anyways if it wasn't this season since we are always having radiant, but this shotgun sure packs a punch. Now I know some of you guys might not be raiders, so you could use something like a chill inhibitor that the gunsmith gave you for free. I also believe that anarchy is also pretty good with this build if you happen to have that. Now for the armor mods, I'm just running triple hands on because we're always meleeing and we can get our super back quick. Then for the arms, I'm running heavy handed once, and then I'm running 2 melee kickstarters so that I can get more melee energy back when I'm expending my armor charges. For the chest, doesn't really matter, just match it to the damage type. For the legs, I'm using stacks on stacks so we get more armor charges whenever we pick up an orb, recuperation so we get more health when we pick up an orb, and then invigoration so that we get more melee energy on orb pickup. Then for the class item, I'm running outreach so we can reduce the melee cooldown whenever we thrust, reaper so that we can make an orb after we thrust, and the powerful attraction to pick up orbs when we thrust. For the artifact, I'd say the most important one is the thick of it, as we're always surrounded, we're killing things, and we can get an armor charge which goes towards our melee kickstart. I would say trace evidence is probably second most important, as rapid precision hits or rapid final blows will give us an ionic trace. So in the chance that you don't have your melee charge, just shooting people with your arc pulse rifle will either give you your melee energy back from facet of balance, or you'll get it back from picking up a bunch of ionic traces. But with all that being said, how do you play the build? And that's what I'm about to tell you. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, this is a pretty unga bunga build, but I would argue that you have way more survivability on this build compared to something like Consecration. Now, you're not doing as much damage compared to Consecration, but you can literally tank everything. You can usually start your engagement with a suspend grenade and then charge up your punch. If they're not an unstoppable, you could probably skip the first step of suspending them and just go for the thunderclap. This will either make the barrier champion put up his shield, which you can break with your radiant shotgun now, or your thunderclap will just stun the overload, which by then you'll have trench barrel and radiant procced at the same time, which will help you delete the champion in a couple of seconds. If there was anyone next to you or even behind you, the lightning strikes will hit everyone in your radius, which in turn will help you just do another back-to-back thunderclap. And if you killed anything, it will make an orb, which gives you woven mail, give you some melee energy back, and 2 armor charges, which will help contribute towards your melee kickstarter. Now, if you are in a sticky situation, you gotta hear me out and believe in yourself, because you gotta remember you have a ton of damage resistance. Just charge the thunderclap for some damage resistance, woven mail, frost armor from the diamond lances, facet of protection, and just shoot out the thunderclap. And if you kill something, thick of it will proc and you get an armor charge on top of the orb that you made. And you get your melee back so often that you don't need something like Monte Carlo, because we have facet of balance, melee kickstarters, invigoration, point contact brace, ionic traces, outreach, and you can even just pop transcendence if you don't have it. And even if you don't have transcendence, just shoot your primary weapon to make some ionic traces and you're good to go. And yeah, that's about it. If you feel like something was missing with this build, or you made any personal tweaks to it, let me know down in the comments below. Did you like it? Does my face look funny? Or if you thought the Kendrick album was trash. I would also like to mention, if you did like this build, consider liking and subscribing, as I'm making a lot of fun and creative builds that you guys definitely don't want to miss out on. And speaking of fun builds, I have this Void Titan build with second chances that you might really enjoy. And with all that being said, take care of yourself, take care of each other. Peace and love, baby.